So, hi, welcome to the first Lavender Caucus interview with an endorsed candidate. You're going to be spending a little bit of time with myself and Kathy Woodward, who is the other co-chair of the Lavender Caucus. And as you can see from our title up above, we're spending time with Mike Gamms from NY27th. Mike, why don't you say some hellos and tell us about yourself?
Can I just do one hello, or do I need to do multiple hellos? Because I could do hellos or hello. I think I
Whatever you
just did
prefer.
multiple hellos. I'm just messing around. Yes, I am Mike Gamms, and I am running for the United States Congress in New York's 27th district. I am on the ballot on the Green Party line in a special election on June 23rd. For the United States Congress, and I'm very excited to have the endorsement of the Lavender Green Caucus, and I'm happy to be here chatting with you guys.
Perfect. So, Mike, I'm gonna ask you a question. It's not on our list, real quick. Do I hear a bird in the background? What kind of bird do you have?
Uh, you may hear some chickens because chickens are my roommates here in New York's 27th district. We respect chickens, and they're my roommates. So
Fair enough.
uh, yeah, there's a few in here. Sometimes they're louder than others.
Fair enough. So, Mike, Kathy and I are going to ask you some questions, some of which you have already addressed in some questionnaires, and some of which we have come up with, which we thought we'd like to get your opinion on. So, Kathy, would you like to take it away?
Well, first thing I would like to do is let it be known that since Margaret and I were counting the ballots as they came in for your endorsement, it was 100% approval rating from the National Lavender Green Caucus. So I just wanted to congratulate you on that.
Oh,
It was
well, thank you.
100% approval rating. So thank you very much for standing up for green values in New York. So I have a couple of few questions for you. And the first one is, what steps would you take to curb discrimination and violence directed at LGBTQIA plus youth in public schools?
Well, this is a major a problem. The struggles that our youth face, not just queer youth, but all youth in general, but particularly queer youth. And I would like to add that in addition to being a member of the Lavender Green Caucus, I'm also a member of the Young Ego Socialist Caucus of the Green Party, which is the youth caucus for those 35 and under. So part of my campaign and just part of my life is to advocate for queer issues and for youth issues. And I think one major step that we could take is that discrimination and violence against queer youth needs to be considered a hate crime, and they need to be included in all non-discrimination policies. And the classification of things as a hate crime is something that I'm actually pretty big on in my campaign. I believe in that we need to have crimes against sex workers classified as hate crimes, crimes against LGBTQ youth classified as hate crimes, because that designation is super important because it really gets to the nature of what those crimes are, and that they were done because of that person's identity, because of who that person is. And that's what the difference between a hate crime and a regular crime is that the causality of it was based on who that person is and was done because they with hate and malice behind it in that way. And so I think that would be a major step that we could take to help curb discrimination and violence against queer youth in schools. I also think that we need to be more inclusive of queer-centric activities in school. It's not just enough to say, oh, well, everyone's invited, so no one is excluded. Inclusion takes more than just an invitation and saying, oh, well, I made this space that's the same space that's always been, and you're welcome to join us. It involves, actively creating spaces that are queer-centric and inviting and welcoming for queer youth to feel like they have activities that they could take part in too, not just like an afterthought invitation to join us.
Thank you very much. That's a good answer.
Yeah. So Let's see. How about another good one for you? What do you think are the biggest issues facing LGBTQIA plus and people of color?
See, that is a very, very good question. Because the things like how do I want to put this? Capitalism and systemic bigotry affect those at the intersect of the most things the most. Um, so like and far too often the voices. So like let me start this over. So yeah, the people that are at the intersect of the most underrepresented communities are often affected the most by these issues. Like if you were to look at the arrest and incarceration statistics, they not only disproportionately affect queer people, but disproportionately affect people of color. So all of these things compound together. And I think that it is essential that we have to center the most marginalized voices when advocating for issues, and it's something that uh, that the LGBTQ plus community has sometimes struggled with, which is sometimes the concerns of white queers get centered more so than queers of color. So I think it takes effort in making sure that we're putting in the work to make sure that voices of color are centered in our advocacy and the concerns of people of color are centered in our advocacy.
Thank you very
Excellent.
much, Mike. That's a good answer.
Mhm. I have a couple more, Dahlia, and then one current type of thing. Do you have questions as well? Should we just switch back and forth, or just go through the questions?
Yeah, I have like three, so if I'm happy to ask my two now, and then we'll go back to you for a couple, and then we'll do the open-end ones.
Cool.
Okay, so Mike, since we talked about issues that queer people face in school settings, and we talked about issues that queer people of color may face, let me ask you a question. So in our broader society, we understand that there are a lot of systemic oppressions directed towards women and girls. What would your campaign do to ensure equality in political representation for all minority people, especially women and girls?
Yeah, see, that is a great question, and I think that in order to look at the specific issue, we also have to look at the broader issue at the same time. Um, and so I firmly believe in the abolishment of capitalism. And so it has to like start with the big systemic things, because if we don't get rid of things like capitalism and we don't change the system, we just make it so that there's more representation of underrepresented people, like women, people of color, people in the queer community. All we're doing is you're creating intersectional capitalism or rainbow capitalism. So I think one of the biggest issues is that the goalposts are maybe set in the wrong place, where there's a lot of like push where it's like, oh, well, we need more women CEOs, we need more women war criminals, and I think that when we advocate for things like that, it's making it so that we're working towards the wrong goal. So I think that we need to work towards not only abolishing capitalism, but making sure that the leaders in the revolution are underrepresented voices. Like it's not enough for like the leaders in capitalism to be diverse. Like we need diversity in revolutionaries.
Yeah,
Thank you for that answer, Mike.
another
So
good
then
one.
that brings me to my next one, and so right now, of course, the whole society is has their focus on COVID-19, but in the queer community, we have been dealing with the HIV/AIDS pandemic for decades and decades now. How would your candidacy um, change that situation in your congressional district for queer people, and especially queer people of color who tend to be disproportionately impacted by lack of adequate health care?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned healthcare, so I must say, just to put it out there, that I believe that healthcare is a human right. And so I believe absolutely in Medicare for all. And it's not enough to say to make healthcare affordable and accessible. We need to completely remove the profit margin from healthcare at all. Like people shouldn't be profiting off of basic human rights. But it's not enough to just like say, oh, well, we have Medicare for all now. You also have to do outreach into those communities that are most affected and maybe don't have the access even once like you have Medicare for all, right? And so when I advocate for Medicare for all and that healthcare is a human right, that includes HIV and AIDS treatment. And I think that a major there's a lot of rewriting of history when it comes to the HIV epidemic, and I think particularly one way to address this is to stop the whitewashing of the Ronald Reagan legacy, because you see this happen often where people today will bring up like, well, Trump is so bad, I wish we could have someone like Bush or someone like Reagan. And I think it's important that we remember how this government, particularly under the Reagan administration, responded to a global health pandemic in the queer community. And I think it's important to be mindful of that history as we're looking at how they are addressing this global health pandemic that is also disproportionately affecting underrepresented communities, marginalized communities.
Thank you very much, Mike. Okay, Kathy, back to you.
Yeah, I've got a few more. Can you briefly describe your top goals when you're elected to this office?
Yeah, I could do that pretty briefly. Well, I can't really do anything briefly, but I'll do it as brief as I can. So, like, part of the reason that I'm running is to provide an alternative. Like, you have options besides these two parties, the Democrat and the Republican, that don't represent you and don't care about you. And in addition to just providing an option, I'm providing an eco-socialist, anti-fascist, anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, radical alternative to the two capitalist fascist war party system for the people of New York 27. In my district, my congressman went to jail. My Republican congressman pled guilty to insider trading and resigned. And our Democratic governor, Andrew Cuomo, had several of his advisors get arrested for corruption just a few years ago. So whichever side you look at it, it's corruption. And so my first top goal is to provide an alternative for the people of New York 27. And in doing so, another goal would be to pull the conversation of my election as far to the left towards the things that I'm advocating for, towards eco-socialism, anti-fascism, anti-capitalism, anti-imperialism, to constantly be bringing up these things and pushing the conversation as far to the left as I possibly can. And one other goal of my campaign would be to continue to expand not only my reach, but the reach of the Green Party and the reach of people that are like-minded, like me, throughout New York 7 and beyond, to continue platforming the message that I care about, which is, again, eco-socialism, anti-fascism, anti-capitalism, anti-imperialism, queer radical revolution or bust.
Sounds good.
Sentiment to my heart.
Okay, I have one more off of the questionnaire. That was a very long questionnaire, and you did a really great job, obviously, to get a 100% approval rating. But the last one off the questionnaire is, why do you wish to hold the office?
Why do I wish to hold this office? Well, first off, it would be a huge honor to be the first ever Green Party candidate elected to the United States Congress. And I think it would set a great precedent that we don't have to just be represented by these two war parties that I keep talking about. These two parties that don't care about us. They don't care if we have healthcare. They don't care if we live or die. They only care if they have a bigger hoard of power and wealth. And I think that the people deserve to have representation that's that's like them. And these people that have been representing us don't represent us. And so I don't wish to hold this office to be a part of the system. I wish to hold this office to continue disrupting this system, to continue exposing the corruption, the lies, and quite frankly, the bullshit of this system, and do things differently, and not to disrupt business as usual.
That's pretty excellent. Let's see, that's the end of the questions that I pulled off of the questionnaire, and I only have one more current. So I'm going to take it back to you, Margaret. Yeah, you go for it.
Okay, perfect. That gives me my chance to do my one-in-one as well, and I'll do my one and go back to Kathy, and then we'll come back. So Mike, as you mentioned earlier, intersectionality, and I want to bring our conversation back to that for just a second. So right now, you are a candidate for the NY27 congressional seat. If you were to be successful in your campaign and win, would you commit to including disabled people in your administration, and how would you go about doing so?
Yeah, I absolutely would commit to including disabled people in my administration, and I'm working on including creating some positions for disabled people in my campaign right now, not just if I were elected office, but while I am running for office. And particularly right now when we have a global health pandemic, I think it's important to, like I've said before, center the people who are most affected by this. And the way in which the response to this health pandemic is sort of shaping up is they're putting out this message that people are disposable, or people's lives are worth less than $1, and it particularly affects disabled people, immune compromised people. These are the most vulnerable people in this situation. So I absolutely think that we need to center the voices of the people that are most affected by this issue, and would absolutely do so if elected to office.
Thank you very much. Okay, Kathy, you're lob back to you for your off the books question.
Off the books question. Alrighty, Mike. You did a totally fabulous video yesterday on the 6th, live with advisor for Indigenous Peoples Policy, Rocio Velandia.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm given to understand that she's a part of your campaign.
Yeah.
That particular video, I mean, that just ripped my heart right out of my chest when she started talking. And I would like to know how you became associated, how these forces came together, and how she's going to help you in your campaign, and what you're going to do for her as well.
Well, thank you so much for this question. I am beyond honored and grateful that Rocio Velandia is the official advisor for Indigenous Peoples Policy for my congressional campaign. I can't begin to even describe how just how great, how honored that makes me feel. As you saw, you were very moved by the video just from me interviewing with Rocio yesterday. And so I've been working with Rocio Velandia for going on 4 years now. We first became acquainted through the Standing Rock movement, the No DAPL movement. And because I spent a lot of time up in Standing Rock, North Dakota, living in a tent in the middle of winter in December in North Dakota. And after they closed down the camps and evicted everyone, it's sort of the water protector movement was sort of displaced. And we sort of found ourselves first in Washington, D.C., and then in New York City. And that's where I met Rocio Velandia through her work with her. She is the CEO of an Indigenous Peoples organization with consultative status at the United Nations. So the first time that I worked with Rocio was actually helping bring the frontline water protectors from Standing Rock, down from 18-year-old kids up to grandparents, to the main floor of the United Nations to talk about their concerns and what we had experienced in Standing Rock. And that began a working relationship with Rocio Velandia on Indigenous peoples issues, not just here in the United States, but all around the world. And I've continued helping with her organization and her advocacy in New York and internationally, both in New York City and at the United Nations on an international level. And when I decided to run for Congress with the Green Party, I reached out to her and asked her if she would be interested in helping out with the campaign in that way, knowing that she has never endorsed or worked with an electoral politician in her entire life. In her 30 plus years of doing Indigenous advocacy, has never believed in this system, believed in the United States government system, the system that colonized her people and stole their land, to do anything for them. But she believes in me, which is really a powerful thing. And so I'm really looking forward to continuing to work with her on developing a more in-depth Indigenous peoples policy. And we hope to put forth the most radical Indigenous peoples policy that's ever been presented in a federal campaign before. That is our goal.
Excellent.
Yeah, I was very glad when you asked me
answer.
that question. Yeah, when you asked me that question, I was very. I could talk about Rocio and her work and the work that we've done together forever. So I'm very glad that you asked me that question.
Unfortunately, we don't have forever in today's interview with you. So we have about 8 minutes left. And I want to ask you one question as well that's kind of off the books and give you a chance to speak from your heart about this. So, Mike, I noticed that you're not being supported by the New York State Green Party. And I was wondering if you could maybe talk about why the state party isn't supporting you, what's going on with that?
Yeah, it's kind of an unfortunate situation, but it's real simple, really, when we break it down for it. And for those who are watching this video that don't know, most of you probably know that there's been a conflict between the Lavender Green Caucus and a bunch of bigots, or a handful of bigots, who think that trans people don't have a right to exist in the Georgia Green Party. And so there's a small handful of transphobic bigots in the Georgia Green Party that have tried to push their hateful platform into the National Green Party and the Lavender Green Caucus. All three people here present, as well as everyone else in the caucus, has been left to do all the heavy lifting to defend our community on our own. And one of the main, one of the battlegrounds for this fight, at least for me personally, happened to be the Green Party of the United States Facebook group, where these bigots were allowed to just push their hateful platform unopposed. And when I saw this, I decided to go gung-ho and call a bigot several times. I may have said that my official congressional platform is that TERFs can eat shit, so to make this long story shorter, I received a phone call from the communications manager of the Green Party of the United States, Michael O'Neill, who is also part of the New York State Green Party. And so I received a phone call from Michael O'Neill and several co-chairs of the New York State Green Party, and they wanted me to tone down my defense of trans people's rights to exist. They wanted to tone police a queer candidate's advocacy for the queer community, and I was not okay with that, and I told them exactly what they were doing. I was like, you are tone policing a queer candidate who's defending queer people's right to exist, trans people's right to exist, defending the fact that trans women are women, which is very clearly in the National Green Party platform. It's an inarguable thing that is a green value. It is in our platform. And when I was told that I needed to tone it down. And instead of being supported by the Green Party of New York when I was fighting bigots, when we were fighting bigots, I was told, hey, actually, can you be a little nicer to the people that don't think that trans people have a right to exist? Can you be a little nicer to the people that are essentially advocating for genocide in your community? And I said, no, not only am I not going to be nicer to the people that are advocating for genocide against our community, I'm not going to be nice to the people that are telling me to be nice to bigots. And I sort of started putting pressure on the fence riders in the Green Party, in the National Green Party, and in my state Green Party in New York for not doing anything about the bigots, not like for looking at people who are bigots and people that are defending their community against bigots and saying, I can't tell the difference between these two things. And I did so by making memes of the communications manager, Michael O'Neill, calling him out for their inability to determine the difference between bigots attacking our community and us defending our community. And because I not only spoke out against the bigotry, but spoke out against the fence riders in the Green Party, particularly communications manager Michael O'Neill, on this issue, I have been disowned by the New York State Green Party because I dared criticize the paid managerial class of the Green Party of the United States communications team, which also happens to be very influential in my state party. So, long story short is I too vigorously defended trans rights to exist and have been disowned by the state Green Party of New York because of it.
That
We are
is,
happy to give you 100% approval rating. Go, Diane.
I was going to say, that is one heck of a story to be taking place, especially right now in 2020. So, Mike, for myself, I'd like to thank you for taking your time to speak with us, to address our caucus members in the Green Party in a broader context in your constituents as well, or potential constituents in New York 27.
Yeah.
And personally, I want to wish you good luck on your campaign, and I hope you do well.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm very, very, very grateful and honored to have received the unanimous endorsement from the Lavender Green Caucus. It really makes me feel special, particularly after having been, disavowed by my own state party for advocating for our community. To be fully embraced and unanimously embraced by our community really just makes my green little heart just grow 3 sizes. So.
Perfect.
Your patience and perseverance is deeply appreciated, Mike. The very best to you.
Oh, well, thank you both very much.
Thank you very much for coming on our interview tonight. Any future candidates, if you manage to win our endorsement, we'll be happy to interview you as well. Take care, everyone. Cheers.